What's up, bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video and another episode of this series on training the things that matter. Last week, that was kind of the introduction to the whole thing, and we went over the big 5 bodyweight upper body movements. So if you haven't checked out that video, I'll link it in the description down below. Today, we're going to be going over the big 3 plus one little extra one for the lower body. As I mentioned in the first video, this isn't about the perfect way to train. I said that if you're into the sort of things that I'm into, which is bodyweight training, handstands, some form of weighted strength training for the lower body, advanced flexibility such as splits, etc., then if you're into what I'm into, then hopefully this video helps you out with that. But obviously, if you're doing exercise in some form, if you're training, if you're focusing on getting stronger, being a better you, then that's the main thing. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into what the big 3 plus 1 are, and then I'm going to give you some context and some reasons as to why. So the big 3 are the squat, hip hinge, gait, and then the extra, the plus 1, would be the hanging leg raise. These 4 movements really do have you covered if you want to just, 1, be strong, athletic, and quote unquote functional with the lower body, but also if you want to get flexible and also have that application to bodyweight training. I think these 4 are going to have you covered. Right, so let's go into each of these ones with a little bit more context, as well as the groupings, the progressions, and kind of a little bit about why before we get into how to go and apply this. So very simply, first up, the squat. There's a reason this is number 1 on the list, because it kind of covers everything you need in the lower body in just one exercise. Now for me, when I'm talking about squatting here, I'm also thinking that it's going to encompass a couple of other drills. Primarily that's going to be the lunging pattern, so doing a lunge, a split squat. That for me would be kind of a progression towards squat, or an option to somebody who maybe doesn't have full equipment. They don't have a barbell or something, they can't load a squat heavy, or perhaps they have a limitation or injury that's preventing them from doing a squat. A lunge is a fantastic option for that person. If you are into the bodyweight game and you're 100% committed to bodyweight training, then the obvious example here would be the pistol squat as kind of the next best thing. But I would encourage you, if you do have access to equipment and you can squat, to start giving squatting a go. The additional benefit here to having a loaded squat is going to be the aspect of loading the spine and the improvements this will have on bone density, especially as we get into aging. There's probably an argument that doing some form of squatting with some load, doesn't need to be 1 rep max effort level of load, is going to be beneficial for, 1, maintaining muscle mass in the lower body, but also for maintaining bone density. So I think whatever end of the spectrum you're on, whether you want to maximally develop your athletic performance, or whether you're just trying to maintain muscle mass or just stay fit and healthy as you age, the squat is a fantastic option with progressions and accessibility at any level. Next up, we have the hip hinge. Now the hip hinge for me covers 3 primary movements. That's going to be 1, the deadlift, arguably one of the best exercises, similar to the squat. It's going to kind of cover everything, certainly in the posterior chain aspect of things. But actually my preferred one here would be the Romanian deadlift. Now the reason I say Romanian deadlift is because the Romanian deadlift is a fantastic posterior strengthening drill. So that would be hamstrings, glutes, lower back, calves. It's going to target all of those, but it's also going to give you a way of developing great hamstring flexibility at the same time. And ultimately, we're going to get into this in the flexibility version of this video, but developing hamstring flexibility is a crucial component to getting more flexible and a useful thing for just day-to-day life and bodyweight training. The final kind of exercise that I would fit into this grouping would be the good morning. There's quite a few variations of this one, but again, it's a hip hinge movement. It's going to target that posterior chain. It's well worth your time. There isn't really a bodyweight alternative for this one. That's kind of the weakness with bodyweight training, is there's no good hip hinging movement. For me, the only really viable alternative here for bodyweight training would be the Nordic curl, or the natural hamstring curl. That's going to give you the best stimulus that you can get with bodyweight training for the posterior chain, for the hamstrings, calves, lower back, glutes. The Nordic is a hard movement. It's not really a hip hinge, but it's going to be the closest thing that you have to developing that aspect within your training if you really don't want to use equipment or you don't have access to equipment. I still think the Nordic by itself is a goal that's perhaps worthy of working on, but it's not the be all and end all. You're going to get many benefits simply from doing, a leg curl in a gym and a hip hinge, whether that be an RDL, deadlift, good morning, etc. Next up, we have Gait. Now, I've actually named this Gait. Originally, I want to name this like plyometrics, because the original intent was jumping and sprinting. jumping and sprinting provide fantastic stimulus for the legs without any equipment and at pretty much any level. We can work on these movements and we're going to get a good training effect from them. Having strong legs isn't just about lifting lots of weight and having muscle mass, it's also about being able to move quickly, explosively, and in some form of coordination, which these drills kind of provide. The reason I named it Gait is because I thought it was worth adding in there walking. Walking is an underrated exercise because, again, kind of like the squat, it's going to be beneficial at all ends of the spectrum. Whether you're an elite level athlete, we need to walk, and walking has benefit in general health and wellness. And if you can't do any exercise, or you're coming back from injury, whatever limitation it is that you have, if you can do some walking, if you can get outside, go for a walk, that's going to be a benefit as well. So I think Gait is an important one, incorporating in some walking, jumping, sprinting, one of the three, all of them into your training is going to be of value in developing your lower body effectively. And then finally, we have the hanging leg raise. I didn't actually originally plan on putting this in. I was just going to stick with the first three, but some people mentioned about core exercises, and I thought, core exercise, although you're kind of going to be covered by squatting, deadlifting, hip hinging, and then also just through general bodyweight movements require a reasonable amount of core strength and stability. I don't think you need a lot of excess core work, but if you are going to choose one, the hanging leg raise is probably the best and going to be the most applicable for those of us who are interested in bodyweight training. The hanging leg raise does a great job at kind of marrying up lots of different aspects, and that would be kind of core compression, flexibility in the lower body as well, so using that hamstring flexibility that you might develop with something like the Romanian deadlift, and also strengthening the abdominals, specifically the lower abdominals, but the hip flexors as well by having to move the legs around in space. So that's really the reasons why I think these really do cover a lot. Again, in terms of the application, let's briefly talk about it. When I mentioned in the upper body one, I said it's not important to work on all of these at the same time. The same thing applies here. You don't need to do all of these at the same times, but equally, it's quite manageable to work on all of these. If we're setting up a training schedule or a workout, we could quite happily do all of these in one session. We could maybe start with some jumping, some sprinting options, then do a strength combination of doing some squats, doing some Romanian deadlifts, and we can finish out with a little bit of core work with some hanging leg raises. That's a pretty solid lower body workout that's going to cover you in terms of being more athletic, being stronger, building some muscle mass, and getting a little bit more flexible. Although we want that long-term consistency at these patterns to get the most bang for your buck, we also want to incorporate some variation within these structures. So again, we kind of touched on this beforehand. Maybe one phase of training, you do some back squats, you do some Romanian deadlifts, you do some tuck hanging leg raises for higher reps, something like 4 sets of 6 to 8. Maybe the next phase you do some box squats, a standing good morning, and some straight hanging leg raises for some lower rep ranges. So again, like the upper body, this is quite nice and simple just to keep things consistent, but apply variation and keep things interesting as well. So that's really it. That's kind of my opinion on lower body training. I think if you kind of have these 4 aspects in your training in some form, again, not all at the same time, but in there independently, you're going to have a nice, well-rounded lower body in terms of strength, athleticism, but also beginning to delve into that flexibility component that we're going to go into more detail next time. As always, I would invite you to ask any questions or leave your own opinion on this one in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this. What would you do? What would you add? What would you take away? Do you agree? Etc. Please let me know in the comment section down below. If you just enjoyed this video, if you found it helpful, make sure you hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. Right next to it is that subscribe button if you're enjoying the Bodyweight Warrior Tribe. But other than that, I'll catch you next one. Have a strong week and